For anything that has a display, has a screen, where a user does something more complex than just checking the time, I suspect these days has browser support. Web technology is so much part of everyday computing that's probably a safe bet that if it's not there, it's going to be there tomorrow, because otherwise it will be irrelevant. If you can't browse the web there, what point is it having that computing device?
Welcome back to the Open Matters podcast, where we talk about open source matters that matter. Today we're doing something a little different. Instead of talking about policy, procurement, or principles, we're talking about engineering decisions and why they matter to real users. We are joined by three of the principal engineers behind the latest Collabora Office release to talk about something that sounds simple, but usually isn't: moving a serious application from the browser to the desktop without breaking everything along the way. Thorsten, Kendi, Tor, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Open Matters podcast.
Yay, hello. Thanks, Richard, for having us.
I thought it'd be really helpful just to get started. Could you just introduce yourselves quickly? Who are you? And perhaps how long or when did you start working on open source software?
Yes. So hey there, I'm Thorsten. Yes, I've been doing that since a while. I think something like 30 years now, with the usual motivations there, like wanting to run software on something that wasn't really wanting to run that software, and also wanting to tinker. So that's how it started. And yes, been working on this free open source Office suite thing also since quite a while, something like 25 years probably by now. So that's about me. Had my fingers in many pies there.
Wonderful. Kendi, what about you? What's your open source history?
Oh, yeah. So I installed my first Linux in 97, actually. It was just because, like at the university, well, in the dormitory where we were, we couldn't use Ethernet, and we were forced into some like sub-local whatnot network on ArcNet, because somebody had like free like ArcNet cards, and Linux was the only thing that actually ran on that. And I fell in love with that, and like continued hacking on that. Joined SUSE like in 1999, and from then like it continued that way. Worked on some SUSE stuff, and then actually in my free time I started working on OpenOffice.org at the time in 2003. I don't know, 20 something years ago, and I don't know what year it is actually. And yeah, since that I'm still loving it. So that's it for me. Over the years, I've done, I don't know, docx export, some integrations to desktop systems, worked on Collabora Online and these things.
Thank you. And finally, that leaves us with Tor.
Yes, so hello, I'm Tor Lillqvist, and my first encounter with open source, I guess, was before it was even called that, like in the late 1980s or something. Back then I was not using even any Unix system, but I was using an obscure mini computer at work, and I wanted to run some interesting open source software that was distributed through Usenet back then, and porting that was a challenge. And one of the things I ported was this TEX or TECH typesetting system, which was interesting because the machine was so much different then. And then I guess about the same time as Kendi started working on OpenOffice, I also started that, and that has continued then, employed by various companies or until now then for Collabora.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very lucky to be surrounded by such great talent. Now, what you've been working on recently is the new Collabora Office release. Just zooming out and taking a very big overview of things, what is it that you have achieved with this new product?
Well, the main thing is that you can now run Collabora Online without it being actually online, but instead inside a single process on your desktop operating system. And the code that usually runs in your browser in online, it is still there. It runs in a web view that is like an embedded browser engine in the software, and all the code that usually runs on the server for normal online, it runs also in the same application as compiled C++ code.
So in a nutshell, what you get is the exact same user experience, the exact same UI as you get in online, also like locally on the desktop, which is quite nice because it's a beautiful user interface. And it's also quite nice because the programming paradigms and the technology that you've got there is also quite nice. So that's two. And the third one is that, of course, like having then the technology there that would, at least in general, also allow you to work with a remote server there. So connect this bit that runs the UI that is local, not with talking with the same process, like with the backend, the same process, but with a remote backend. So you can kill three birds with one stone, essentially.
There's one additional thing that is an advantage here, and that is the rendering of the document is just the same because it uses the same backend for rendering of the fonts and also the layout of the documents and everything. You can achieve just the perfect same view of the documents in the web browser and also on the desktop as long as you have similar version number of the app.
So I have a question. Some of our viewers might not be software developers. Can you just help us understand a little bit? How does an application like that run? You're talking about the back end, and you're talking about rendering, and you're talking about UI. What are the different layers, and how are they built up?
So maybe I will take this one. So if you think about like Collabora Online as the online application, you can differentiate that like reasonably easily. So you have your web browser, and in there you have some like web page. In this case, this is the Collabora Online, and that talks to some backend, to some server. On this server, like this renders the tiles, whatever the user types on the keyboard goes to this server. So there goes this back and forth communication between the front end, which is like what you have in the web browser, and the back end, which is the server where the actual editing takes place. What we are doing in this app is that we remove this network communication here. So it is all in one app. So instead of the web browser, you have this web view in the app, which is something that the system provides on iOS, on macOS, on the Android as well, actually. For the Linux, we have the Qt that provides this, what would be the web browser, and similar on Windows. So instead of web browser, you have this. The JavaScript is the same. Maybe there are some conditions. Okay, so I'm running in the web browser. I'm running in this kind of web view. But other than that, like it's the same code. And for the server part, we compile it directly, like for the target platform. So be it iOS, be it macOS, be it Android, and it runs directly on the hardware that you have at hand. So there is no network communication. You have it all, everything you can do here is offline, and it works like all these three things bundled into one.
So you started talking about some of the benefits there, or some of the differences. It's offline. Before we talk more about that, what were some of the limitations of an app in a browser? What are the technical difficulties that having a desktop application resolves?
So maybe let me try. So again, very high level. So though the browser is quite ubiquitous, it's also quite powerful by now. But it's still a very, 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 very strictly limited and sandbox environment, and for good reasons. Because essentially what you do in a browser is you run code that you cannot necessarily trust. So there's going to be an immense amount of engineering invested into making that safe and not allowing the browser and the code that runs on a random web page to access anything on your system or in another browser tab or in your clipboard, etc., etc. So that goes a little bit against this actually then being able to use that, because if it's very sandboxed, you can't get anything in and anything out. So then there's a bit of a compromise. And then there's this kind of granting access to your microphone, to your camera, etc. So asking the user specifically or to the clipboard to grant access, which is also not a great user experience. So the challenge with the browser is both this kind of sandboxing but trying to like always push against the ceiling there, trying to do more than is allowed. And the other thing is that the browser is not really like as powerful and not as quick as providing access and to provide very, very good and high level APIs to lots of operating system functionality. So one of the two major problems that any web application faces is complex clipboard content. So structured, not just plain text, but like structured, formatted text or spreadsheet data. And the other is printing. And of course, if you want to do anything with your local file system, usually you're out of luck as well.
So what does the desktop allow you to do, and what will this feel like for a user if they are perhaps used to using Collabora Online or maybe not? And what should they expect to see when they try out the new Collabora Office?
Well, the main thing is that they have access to their local files on their machine. They don't need to go through outer level of some web server that provides access to documents stored on the web server. They see the files that they have on their local system.
I would probably answer that question the other way around. So the trick is to not have any limitations at all. So it is a native application, like as you are used to it. Like you install something locally, this is the experience you're getting. So forget all the limitations. Don't think about limitations. You've got it all, including this. As we said before, this kind of it's the same user interface. So it looks and feels like almost the same.
Thinking in a different world that I know a little bit about. So you're talking about document editors. I've done bits of 3D printing and some CNC machining, and I've used things like Fusion 360. And they operate very happily on my desktop computer. I've tried out an online offering as well, something like Onshape, and that's browser-based. But if anyone's tried the Fusion 360 browser-based thing, they'll see that it's completely different. As far as I understand, this is a very difficult thing to do, to get desktop things to work well online or vice versa. So why is this so difficult to get right then?
In general, there's, I think, some massive impedance mismatch. So if you just look at the technology stack that you're using, then usually very early on during engineering, you decide between this one or that one. You decide between desktop and browser. You decide between mobile and browser. You decide between mobile or desktop. And each of that then downstream has some engineering platform, API, programming language, library decisions, plus the cross-platform, cross-device, like Flutter, like Qt. So there's a number of those frameworks that promise this cross-platform, like or Java, like write it once, debug it everywhere, or maybe even run it everywhere. So that usually is not easy to pull off, at least not to a level of quality where it's beyond proof of concept, where it's like the first tier experience on all platforms. So that's the outside of it. But then of course there's a way, obviously, how Kenny and Tor pulled that off.
So Kendi and Tor, you have some pedigree, some experience of doing this previously, I understand. You were both involved in the work of putting Collabora Online onto Android and Apple. So what was that like? How did it compare to this more recent project of putting it into a desktop? What were the lessons that you learned from porting it into mobile apps?
Well, yes, go ahead.
So actually, like this idea of like combining it all together into one app is not new. So it was actually Tor who has done it the first time for the iOS device. How many years ago? 5 years ago or something like that. We had this like first app done this way, and then I did the same for Android. So the idea to have like all the server and the JavaScript and WebView combined into one thing is not that totally new. But like what is totally new now is that we support just all the major things the same way. We have it also on macOS, Windows, and Linux.
One thing that was at least initially thought to be a problem was that iOS back then at least was very eager to take resources from you if you don't use the app, but you switch to some other app in between. So that would be hard to handle.
So tell me, is the process of taking a browser app and putting it onto a mobile phone, is that the same as putting it onto a desktop or completely different?
Well, yes and no. In some ways, it is the same basic principle, but of course, all the details are quite different.
So the trick there is the really nice portability that is already. I mean, this OpenOffice LibreOffice family of application has been ported quite far and wide, and by some lucky strike and some historical accident, chose an implementation language which today is kind of probably the sweet spot of portability because it's using C++, relatively low level, close to the machine, and pretty much whatever has any computing device like any CPU probably can compile that and run that. So the substrate on which on top of that is built is already quite portable. That said, there's of course an immense amount of engineering still needed because you always need to shoehorn then this communication across the threads and pretending this is still a network protocol, because in this web view it's still JavaScript, so it's still the case that you for the web view it has to feel like passing a message to some remote server. So some amount of that has to be there, has to be found some way to engineer that in a way that it's compatible with the local system, and they're all different. So Windows is different from Mac, is different from any Unix or Linux. So there was still like work necessary, but relative to the amount of like 10 million lines of code or something, that was manageable in finite time.
The way that I understand it in my very limited capacity is that it's, you know, something like a car, and you've got the engine, and that's the kind of the core that is running everything, and then you've got the chassis and the controls and the dashboard around it, which would be your UI, and then and so then what you guys are doing is sort of changing the wheels, and that's the kind of thing, you know, that helps it to run in a different environment. But essentially, as long as you've got a reliable engine and chassis that are happy to go off-road or on a racetrack, then whatever wheels you want to put on it is all okay. Is this division a helpful way of thinking about things? Tell me what's helpful. Tell me where I'm going wrong.
That's an interesting analogy, and I'm not sure like if it fits or not. What I find exciting about this project, about putting this on the desktop, is that we have reusability and like code reuse in the DNA kind of thing in Collabora. Always, like when we are doing something new, we are lucky enough that we are able to use that for new things that come later. So as I say, like initially, like all this started with Tor doing this for iOS. But then, because it was also on Android, and we had to like enable it for tablets, we started to be able to handle kind of like UI that is not just the mobile thing, so that already has some kind of toolbar and everything. And then like we had to extend the Android app to Chromebooks, and then like we had to support like some normal keyboard that you do have there, and really start behaving as the desktop app, even though it was still in the years like when it was all just a mobile app. And then, like, of course, it helped us now, like when we started porting that to Windows and Mac OS, because like we didn't have to focus that much on the JavaScript and UI point of view of that, and more focus on the core work. So I had lots of fun with like using the macOS native APIs. I think Tor has lots of things that he had to do for Windows there, because it's just a different system. So initially, like the Collabora Online was mostly Linux, but then adding Windows support and macOS support was the hardest thing here. And we didn't have to do that much on the UI side of that. So that was great.
Was there a moment when you went from just nothing to everything working? Is there sort of one eureka thing that just fixed it all, or is it just incremental? First you get a document to open, then you think about maybe trying to edit it?
I think it took like at least 4 months before I could even see anything show up in the app. So until then, I had just like worked on the more basic things that I knew had to be working before I could even imagine seeing anything being displayed on the screen. So when I first got the first tile, as we call them, and I saw that for the first time, that was really a eureka moment.
Who won the race to get the first tile? Was it you or Kendi?
I don't remember. Do you remember, Kendi?
I'm not sure. I'm afraid it was me, because for me it was easier. Just because there was this iOS app already, then like lots of things were kind of like prepared for the Apple world there. I'm not sure who was first, but I would expect that Tor had just much more work there. So I think it was me, but we didn't measure that. Like I was happy when Tor had it working on Windows the first time. I suppose he was the same for me. So
yes.
Thorsten, when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned how web browsers have become almost the default development arena. It's the most ubiquitous. It's the most universal runtime. Is it the best language, the best environment for cross-platform support?
I mean, at least for this, for the requirements that we find here. So this need and this can, as Kendi says, this DNA. The best thing you can do is reuse your code. So make your code portable and make it as universal as possible. So then you need to only invest into the engineering bonds, and then whenever you improve that, you improve it for all the platforms and for all your users. So within that frame, clearly the web UI is a wonderful technology stack, like anything that runs in a browser, because it's extremely widespread, and there's millions of developers like working on that platform and also for that platform. So there's this flywheel of improvement and innovation and getting better, and a new framework and better ideas. So, and then browser competition. So Chrome is faster, Firefox. And so you get this kind of effects there where it gets better much faster than everything else, and also more portable, more featureful. So being able to use that, like, of course, where it comes from is from online, from the browser, but then discovering that actually all this great technology is also available on mobile, and it's also available these days, at least on desktop operating systems, and then being able to combine all those small little things and benefits and say, okay, look, we can build something that looks the same, works the same, and even the development environment is actually great, because it gives you, with comparatively little amount of engineering, a great UI compared to everything else. I mean, I'm sure there's other languages where you get also really great experience, let's say Swift or something like that. But then again, you lack portability. So given the frame that you want maximum portability, and you want also maximum efficiency and nice quality, and something that runs in a browser, then you end up there. And as I said, luckily we're in the sweet spot where this web view is something that is a core component of normal operating systems, both mobile and desktop. So it doesn't even come with extra baggage. So we just use what's there already on the system in this case.
I think when we were talking about how this podcast might go, you said earlier that at this point we can now port it to anything with a CPU, really.
Yeah, right. So we can port it to anything that has a processor, and ideally has someone having ported a web browser. But for anything that let's say has user interfacing, like has a display, has a screen where a user does something more complex than just checking the time, I suspect these days has browser support. So that's the absolutely underlying part of the matrix. Web technology is so much part of everyday computing that's probably a safe bet that if it's not there, it's going to be there tomorrow, because otherwise it will be irrelevant. If you can't browse the web there, what point is it having that computing device?
Well, I look forward to having document editing on my smart fridge and my bicycle computer soon. So tell me, why did you want to do this, and why was this important to you as a project?
Maybe if you ask this question, like, why are you working on this at all? I would say, like, because it's fun. It's just,
That's a good reason.
Yeah, like it is always exciting to be able to extend like what is possible. I talked about this previously, and I just love this possibility to extend it to for this and that, because maybe in 3 years from now, like it will open another possibility to do something new and exciting again. I don't know. So Thorsten mentioned this cooperation between desktop applications and co-editing in there, and I think like this is a great step toward this, which of course aligns with like what Collabora is doing for the sovereignty control and stuff. But for me, it starts with like this is fun. So I'm so lucky to be in Collabora working on fun stuff.
So then, one last question for you before we close. What do you say to your non-technical friends that you've been working on recently?
Well, if it is somebody who has used some kind of online editing, I would then try to explain that it is the same thing, and has the same user interface, but it runs completely on your own machine and not in a server.
Yeah, I think that's the really so the unique thing there really is that it's purely local. It doesn't even need a network. It doesn't even send a ping somewhere. So you install it and then you can work completely offline. And there's nothing needed. Like there's this progressive web apps, and that occasionally checks like is there some update, etc. So this is really local. And it runs at native speed. So it's not like running some random emulations, because it's actually a web page, but it's kind of copied locally. This is a native applications with full access, like the entire API surface of your operating system is there, like no compromises. Yeah, but okay, maybe that's more for the technical friends.
It's okay, I like it. I think I managed to follow, so I'm sure others will be fine. Tor, Kennedy, Thorsten, thank you so much for joining us. I've learned a huge amount. I'm sure our listeners have as well. It's been a really good time sharing with you. Thank you very much.
Richard, thanks so much. It was great fun. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.